Welcome back to another episode of the Moments of Joy podcast. If this is your first time on the show, welcome. This is a space that's created specially for parents and family members raising children with special needs. My name is Camille Joy, and I'm your host. MVPs, welcome back. You know, I greet you at the top of every single episode because you guys are what I like to call my most valuable players. And you press play on every episode. You join us online on social media, and you're here on the podcast. And I salute you and I say, welcome back. Today's episode, we're going to talk about IEPs. Over the past few weeks since our relaunch in April, we've had a few people on the podcast. I hope that you have enjoyed our guests and have more coming on to be helpful and give tips, and doctors and speech pathologists coming up. I'm excited about those episodes, but right now, today, we're going to dive into IEPs. I recently had a reel that I did on IEPs using the Kendrick Lamar song, They're Not Like Us, and that it went viral. That helped me to see that so many parents and children not only needed help with IEPs, they didn't understand IEPs, but the special education system is so broken that a lot of us are really fighting through this. Let me read you a quote I found. This wasn't even in my plans for today, but I want to share it. It's the special education system isn't universally designed to effectively meet the diverse needs of children with disabilities. It's often criticized for being fragmented, lacking resources, and failing to adequately integrate children with disabilities into mainstream classrooms. Additionally, there are concerns about the lack of trained personnel, disparities in funding, and potential for mislabeling and over-identification of students. So let's just sit that right there. The special education system is broken around the United States, and that is all the more reason for us as parents to be educated. We have to be. And so we're going to get into this. The Individual Education Plan, that's the IEP, Individualized Education Plan for your child. It's a legal document that is put into place. Once you sign that and they sign the paper, this is a legal document that the school is now responsible for giving your child their individualized education plan according to their need. And so let's backtrack. How do you even get evaluated? Many of us have a child that has a diagnosis, maybe autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, ADHD. But if you don't quite know yet, and your child has maybe been struggling in school, sometimes it comes out in behavior, sometimes it can come out in the way that they learn with low grades. Let me give you a little story about my son. So I have 5 sons, and Mason is my autistic child. My son Kenneth, he's 18 years old right now, and when he was 15 was when I started to notice that he was having issues that needed to go beyond my discipline or punishment, or maybe getting him extra help. He continued to get bad grades in math, and the teacher would email me all the time about him clowning around. So I addressed it a couple of times, and then I said, you know what? Let me get him tutoring. Maybe he's really struggling, and I'm going to get him tutoring. So we did tutoring for about 2 months, and then I realized that it wasn't helping. Nothing was changing. His grades were still low. The teacher still had complaints, but this was the only class where he had a complaint. The rest of the teachers had no complaint about him. He was a model student, and I couldn't understand why. But then something clicked. I said, let me get him evaluated because something else may be going on. And I only thought that way because now I had years of experience in dealing with a child with autism. So Kenneth went on in high school, his sophomore year, to get evaluated. And he indeed got diagnosed with a disability, dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is like dyslexia, except dyslexia is for reading and writing, Dyscalculia is for math. It is a learning disability for math. And I felt horrible that all that time I did not notice. I knew, yeah, he did struggle in math. Um, he did sometimes clown around, but it wasn't until, that light bulb went off to let me get him evaluated that he got help. He got an IEP in high school. He got a para. He went from getting a D to a B plus A all the time in math because he had the support that he needed. Um, I beat myself up a lot. I was like, how didn't you see all this time? But I didn't know until I was engulfed in this space. Now having a child with a severe disability. And so I share that because sometimes you don't know your child's needs. And an evaluation isn't something that's going to hurt them. An evaluation, I think sometimes even culturally, we see this label and we're like, no, people tell us, don't put that on your child. Don't give them that label. But the label actually will help them to get resources. Kenneth wouldn't have been able to get on the honor roll if he did not have the IEP. He would have continued to struggle through math. And now he's going to be going into his senior year. He's a scholar athlete and he's doing good in school. We haven't had any more issues, and I just wish he would have gotten that support a whole lot earlier. So I say to you, if your child may seem to be struggling in an area and you might think it's behavioral, I want to encourage you to seek a evaluation and see what else could be going on. Because on the surface, he was on punishment. I put him on punishment, and I really thought it was behavioral. I thought, Kenneth, if you don't get it together, I'm taking the game away. I'm doing all these things, and it wasn't. It was something else. And even at that age, he didn't know how to tell me, Mom, I'm really struggling in math. I would say, well, stay after school for help. We did that. Well, get tutoring for him. We did that. He needed more support. So having that IEP, having that diagnosis got him the support that he needed to extend beyond that. Assistive technology in school, more notes, more time on tests. It helped him to be able to succeed and gave him more tools. So I share that just to encourage someone who maybe your child doesn't have an IEP yet. It's okay. Get that child some help. So the evaluation process is where you begin. If you don't have a child with a special need, and you're just wondering, maybe your child needs a little bit of help. Maybe you're wondering, you have two ways you can get evaluated. You can ask the school to bring your child through an evaluation, and they will evaluate everything. They'll evaluate speech, cognitive. If they're young, they'll evaluate every single thing. Mason was diagnosed with autism. He was also diagnosed with intellectual disability because I had him re-evaluated. And they were able to, test different things now that he was older. And so they will do a thorough evaluation. You can get an evaluation from the school, and or you can request that the school do an outside evaluation, individual evaluation. I hadn't known about this until more recently because I'm advocating for Mason so strong. Still, guys, I'm in the fight for him to get music and art. And I learned that I can request an outside person who is not affiliated with the school or the district evaluate my child, and the school will have to pay for it. So my son's district had a form on the district website, which I didn't know until I found this out recently. Or sometimes in different districts, you may be able to just send an email and request it. But you do not have to just have the school evaluate the need. You can get an outside individual assessment done for your child at the cost of the district. The district will have to pay for that if you request it. I think, The upside, the pros to that is that you have an outside person, probably more thorough to evaluate your child. But especially if you're in a district where, you know, maybe you don't trust the education of the person doing the diagnostic, or the diagnostician. Um, it all depends. But if you want an outside person to evaluate, you can. They will test areas of development, including cognitive function, academic skills, speech and language, fine and gross motor skills, sensory processing, and emotional behavior functioning. Testing may be performed by the school psychologist, special educators, speech therapists, and occupational therapists. If the school denies your request for an evaluation, they must prove or provide a written explanation as to why they are denying it. And you can ask for that prior written notice, PWN. Always, whenever there's a denial, you tell them you want it in writing. Because guess what? You don't have to take their no for an answer. We're going to get there. I'm going to go there soon, but you don't have to take their no for an answer. When you get an evaluation and that process is done and they tell you what they found, whether it's autism, ADHD, sensory processing, intellectual disability, dyslexia, dyscalculia, they'll tell you what they found. Number one, you don't have to agree. And if you do agree, you go ahead and sign the paper, but you don't have to agree. You can say you don't agree and you don't have to sign the paperwork. But if anything that you request, like if they say, hey, we want to give your child 24 hours of speech therapy in a group setting, and you say, no, my child has a greater need and they need 65 hours of speech therapy one-on-one, you advocate for that. You can say, no, I don't agree. Can you give me your finding in a prior written notice and why you're refusing to give him 64 hours one-on-one? And then when you have that notice, you go up and you file your complaint with the district. You ask for a due process hearing, or you file a complaint with the state. Okay? 2. And I don't know why these balloons just rolled up here, but on my screen. But you file a complaint either way. So before you go into that IEP meeting, wherever it is, I think we've gotten past the initial evaluation. But before you go into your IEP meeting, where maybe it's your yearly IEP meeting, or maybe it's the initial one where they'll tell you what they found, what they want to put in place, make sure you've written down your own notes, what you want to see for your child. One mistake that I made is just, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I went right into the IEP meeting and they led the way and I said, yes, yes, okay. I shook my head, I signed the paper, and I left because I didn't know any different. Now I know I do not have to agree. If I don't agree, I can say it out loud. But for so long, I wanted Mason to have music and art. And I just shared that I wanted this for him without knowing that it was his legal right to have it according to the federal law, IDEA, and the FAPE. So I started to look up laws that protected children with disabilities in the special education system. So parents, we have to educate ourselves along this way. If we don't, then we're just relying on other people to tell us what's going on, what's going to happen. But as you sit at that table with all of these people that might have these titles, you be encouraged and you know that you belong at that table and they are not the experts. You are. You hear me? You are the expert of your child. You birthed this child, you live with them day in and day out, and you know their need. So that's why your notes before you go in that meeting is important. Write down what you would like to see. Write down what your child's needs are. If they get denied for assistive technology, you say you don't agree, and then you take it up to due process. You complain. If they get denied for occupational therapy, you say you don't agree, and you take it up to someone else. So when there is a denial, it does not have to stop there. I want to stress that so much. You can hire an advocate. Advocates can be expensive or they can be affordable. There are organizations like the ARC, who is all around, and just different people that you may be able to find on social media that are advocates that know the law. If you have more money, you can hire a special education attorney, but there's never a time where you have to stand by yourself. You can bring your aunt, your cousin, your mother, your father, your friend in that IEP meeting with you so that you're not alone. They don't have to know anything, but they can be there as your support, because a lot of times it's them against us. When you sometimes you need support in that IEP meeting. I never brought anybody else but me. But in my next IEP meeting for Mason, I have an advocate. I have my friend coming who's a fierce mama and knows the law, and I have my husband. So I'm not going in there alone. I am not. I'm going in there to fight for his needs, and I'm going in there with emotional support because that's what I need. Because we've been in there with me crying and the teachers crying. But what resolve do we have? Nothing. Everybody's just emotional. And no, we're not doing that. So it is a lot to navigate. But I would say start looking up laws in your state. What are the laws? See, I wouldn't have ever known that Mason was entitled to music and art if I didn't start Googling that law. If I didn't look in my state and see what were the laws. I see that my state of Texas, every school gets $6,100 and I believe $80 per child with an IEP. So that let me know, okay, you are getting money for my child to be receive the education that they're supposed to receive, so you need to do your job. And I'm going to hold you accountable to it. And that is understanding their rights and the law. So when the school pushes back and they say no, that's okay. You push back and you take it up and hire who you need to hire. When you get the IEP and when the meeting's over, normally they ask you, do you want to waive the 5-day waiting period before any of these services start taking into place? You don't have to waive the 5-day period. You can wait. I think what that waiting does sometimes is give you a moment to think. I've been outside of the IEP meeting and I've asked for an amendment to what we just talked about. Okay, well, in that meeting, they said Mason couldn't have music and art. Well, I want you to amend that because legally he should be able to. I said, you have no data to prove that he can't go. So guess what? They had to get some data. Ask your people for the data. The teachers, who's denying him, what data do you have? I want to see. If you're saying they can't sit down, show me the data. If you're saying they're not able to be in general education, show me the data that proves that. Don't just take it as a word. You require them to show you the data that they've taken. A lot of times they haven't taken any data. They're just relying on parents not knowing the law. They're just relying on you coming to be intimidated, calm, as we should be, but they don't think parents are educated enough to know that law. And a lot of times we're not, just because you don't know what you don't know. Like I just shared about me and my son Kenneth. I remember being a young mom, and just it was so much, even with school, that I didn't know. We're all navigating this. But just know that you can fight for more for your child in school. And if you're not happy, you can go all the way up. And I've heard so many success stories of parents who said, I got my child an individual assessment by a private person. They were evaluated. and it was proven that the school couldn't meet their need. So then the school had to pay for them to go to private education until they were 21 or 22 or 23 even. I've heard that time and time again. So parents, you advocate. Empower yourself as an advocate. Build a support system around you. Manage your emotions and celebrate your wins. I've written a guide, and it's called The Ultimate IEP Guide for Parents, a step by step walkthrough. I just want to plug that right there. If you go onto our website at mojpodcast.com, you'll see it. And it's just $10, but it's 25 pages of printable resources and a step by step guide, really just walking you through this process. But the IEP, it is literally help for your child, um, and help for them. If there are 25 children in the classroom, you know what? Your child may need a little bit more assistance, a little bit more help, a little bit more time. And I remember my two cousins when we were growing up. I had two cousins, and I remember my aunt telling me that she fought for my two cousins to get extra time on their tests. Now, as a kid, hearing her say that, I obviously had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. But I remember that. When we became adults, my cousin recently shared that he had dyslexia and that his mother fought and advocated for him in the schools. So I understand, and she had two children with dyslexia, and I understand how back then, now we're 40. Back then, it may have been even harder for her to advocate. Now we have each other. You're listening to this podcast. We have social media. We have Google. I can't imagine how hard it was for her back then. But I feel like now we have so much support. And so we can help each other navigate through this process. Also, one thing my mom used to always tell me was to document everything. If something happens one day at school, you keep a notebook of things that are happening that will help support your child's case. Um, I started documenting Mason's love for music because maybe I need to play this in my IEP meeting, that he thrives on music. I said, he may not be able to prosper in writing. He may not be a mathematician, but he's a singer already. That's showing me that my child has an interest in the arts and he has a need for the arts because he will sing and he won't speak. So it's up to me to fight for him. I know some of you are listening like, I cannot believe that he's being denied these services. I know, but there are children all around the United States that are being denied a proper free education. And so it's up to us to really fight and to understand our rights and know what we can do. Um, don't be ashamed if your child is in need of an IEP. It's really to help them. I keep saying that. I want to say it again because, for me, we grew up in a time where an IEP, and I can't even say we grew up in a time because I've heard it right now that, it creates embarrassment when your child has to get pulled out the classroom. That's not always true either, because as a parent, you can help stay in control of that narrative, especially as your child grows, affirming them in who they are and even in their need for help. If it's ADHD, autism, affirming them in that and not leaving it to the world to motivate and inspire your child. You be the one to motivate and inspire them, even with a disability, so that when they grow up, they feel like, you know what, my mother was my number one, my dad was my number one champion, educator, pusher, motivator. We have the ability to stay ahead of that narrative. And affirmation goes so far. Wonderful spoken word over your children, it goes so far. My oldest son is 23 today, and I had him when I was 16. I was very hard on him because I had him when I was 16. I pushed him so hard as a kid um, because I wanted so much for him. I affirmed him. I screamed at him when he didn't do right, and told him what he couldn't do, what he couldn't turn out like. And today he graduated with, not today, but last year he graduated with his master's in social work. He's following his dreams of being a professional wrestler and possibly joining the WWE. And he's doing amazing. But when I think back, it was a lot of affirming along the way, a lot of I believe in you, a lot of helping them see beyond what's in front of them. The same things we have to do as adults. It doesn't just go away because they're children. It begins when they're children. If you think about your life, you know how hard it was to keep that confidence in yourself. And so you be the loudest voice, you be the loudest cheerleader, and encourage them even with an IEP. So I hope that was helpful for you. I chattered a lot, but IEPs are there. There's also something called a 504 plan, and that also could be for people who have a disability, or for people that have more medical needs. But it's also that 504 plan can go with them through college, where the IEP stops at graduation. So that's something, another thing to look into. But there's no shame in getting that individual education plan for your child. This is not 1965, ladies and gentlemen. Let's accept the help that is needed for our children. And if you need a little extra assistance, go ahead and grab that ultimate IEP guide that I wrote it in one day. I stayed up 12 hours just pouring in all the knowledge, giving you guys printable resources that you can use along your journey. All right. All right, guys. Don't forget to follow and connect on social media. Share this podcast with a friend that you might have that might need a little motivation, encouragement, or community. And as we wrap up, always remember that you have the option to choose joy. Bye bye.